What if the richest places on Earth are the ones everyone ignores? Not because they lack resources, but because the powers that control the world don't want you to fully understand them. Africa holds some of the largest untapped deposits of gold.
Mali has been handed control of Barrick Gold.
Chaos and unrest in Senegal. Protesters blocked the highway into Dakar with burned tires and trucks.
It's a big win for the country.
The world's most sought-after uranium and massive oil reserves that fuel economies across continents. But wealth is not the same as power, and control is not the same as ownership. Today we ask a question few dare to explore: who really controls Africa's gold, its uranium, and its oil? Not in theory, not in textbooks, but in reality, behind the deals, the pipelines, and the boardrooms. The answer will reveal not just who profits, but who shapes the geopolitical future of a continent. Africa's gold, beyond gold rush imagery. Gold is more than jewelry. It is liquidity, political leverage, and financial security. Countries like Ghana, South Africa, Mali, and Tanzania are among the top producers. But ask a miner in Kumasi, a worker in Tarkwa, or a small town outside Johannesburg, and they'll tell you a very different story. The gold is here, but the wealth often flows somewhere else. Who buys the largest shares of African gold? The largest refining and trading hubs are in Europe and Asia, especially Switzerland, Dubai, and China. Multinational mining firms like Barrick Gold, Anglo Gold Ashanti, and Newmont control vast concessions. These companies don't just extract, they negotiate tax breaks, export incentives, and infrastructure deals that shift profits out of Africa. This isn't accidental. This is economic power engineered over decades. Uranium, the fuel of modern power. If gold secures wealth, uranium secures power. Uranium is not merely a mineral, it is the key component for nuclear energy, medical isotopes, and strategic deterrence. Africa's richest uranium deposits are in Niger, Namibia, and South Africa. Niger alone accounts for a significant portion of global uranium exports. But who buys that uranium? France does. French utility giants like EDF rely on African uranium to power dozens of reactors across Europe. In fact, until recently, Niger's uranium supply was almost synonymous with French nuclear energy. This has had profound political implications. France has maintained a heavy presence in Niger, not just militarily but economically, securing contracts, refining stakes, and political influence. Meanwhile, Russian and Chinese companies are increasingly entering the uranium sector, shifting the balance. So while the mineral comes from African soil, the real control lies in state-sponsored corporations from Europe and Asia, global nuclear supply chains, governments whose energy futures depend on foreign sources. Oil, the black blood of the global economy. Oil is the lifeblood of modern civilization. Nigeria, Angola, Libya, Algeria. These nations have some of the largest oil reserves in the world. Yet ask why there's so little prosperity in comparison to the revenue extracted, and the answer often comes down to who controls the wells, the pipelines, and the markets. For decades, Western oil majors like ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, Total Energies, and Eni dominated African oil. These companies didn't just extract barrels, they shaped contracts, influenced export routes, and negotiated fiscal and security arrangements that maximized shareholder returns, not national development. More recently, China's state-owned giants like CNPC and Sinopec have gained influence, offering infrastructure financing tied directly to oil access. The result? Africa produces energy that fuels factories, cars, and cities across the globe, yet struggles with energy access and economic diversification at home. Who sets the prices? It's one thing to extract resources, it's another to determine their value. The prices of gold, uranium, and oil are set on international markets, primarily outside of Africa. Gold is priced in London and Zurich. Oil is benchmarked in New York, WTI, and London, Brent. Uranium contracts are negotiated in opaque, long-term deals, rarely visible to the public. This means that while African nations produce the resource, the pricing power, or the ability to influence how much they are paid, largely resides with buyers and traders in the global north and east. Africa sells raw materials, others set the price. This difference between production and pricing determines who benefits. Political power beyond borders and tankers. Let's face the geopolitical reality. Resource wealth attracts attention. Sometimes it arrives as investment. Sometimes it arrives as competition. And sometimes it arrives as military presence. Foreign military bases in Africa, from French garrisons in the Sahel to Chinese logistics hubs, often align with areas rich in strategic minerals. This is not coincidence. Whether it's infrastructure deals tied to mining rights, security partnerships near oil fields, or foreign naval presence guarding coasts, control of resources often translates into influence over nations. Governments may retain sovereignty on paper, but in practice, influence flows through those who buy the gold, refine the uranium, and burn the oil. Is Africa losing or regaining control? In recent years, the narrative is shifting. Africa isn't passive. New partnerships emerge. China's Belt and Road Initiative, African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, investment regional power collaborations, local stakeholders demanding better terms, countries are renegotiating contracts, some are adding value locally instead of exporting raw materials. But the old power structures are not disappearing overnight. Corporations still dominate extractive sectors. Global markets still set prices. Foreign governments still influence policy outcomes. Yet the very fact that these conversations are happening, that African nations are insisting on better deals and strategic autonomy, signals a change. This is not the end of foreign influence, but it may be the beginning of a different kind of resource diplomacy. Conclusion: who truly controls Africa's wealth? Control is not simply about who owns the resource, it's about who sets the contracts, who controls pricing, who directs investment, and who shapes the geopolitical narrative. African nations produce vast quantities of gold, uranium, and oil. But until pricing power, refining capacity, and global market influence are more equitably shared, the true control will continue to sit largely with foreign entities. However, a shift is underway. A new generation of leaders, thinkers, and policymakers is asking tough questions. Should Africa refine its own gold? Should it build its own nuclear fuel processing? Should it break free from exporting raw oil? These questions will determine not just Africa's economy, but its place in the global order. Because wealth is not just in the ground, it is in the power to decide what happens to it. If this exploration opened your eyes to the forces shaping global resource control, like this video, subscribe to the Global Politics for weekly deep dives, hit the bell icon so you never miss our next documentary. Your support lets us unpack the geopolitics others won't.